Hey guys, welcome back to the Discerning Gamer. So, we finally got to see some more of Anthem at the EA Play event this evening. And it's a game that ever since I saw the initial reveal trailer for, I've been absolutely pumped to see more of. So, I managed to get the whole Anthem segment of the press release recorded, so I've cut out all the fat and I'm just going to go through the most interesting bits and add a bit of my own commentary and speculation on top of that there. But one important thing I want to address is how Anthem could succeed Destiny as this new format of MMO where there's a continuous life cycle to the game, there's a continuous story and progression, and it's more than just a single player experience. It's something that you play multiplayer, but obviously in a more instance format with a close group of friends and maybe extended into larger raid environments. So I think that BioWare are a fantastic studio. They've had some missteps recently, but they have got the potential to take what Destiny pioneered and evolve it into an entirely new kind of experience, which I'm really looking forward to.
The gods vanished and left our world in chaos, creating, altering, destroying.
If there's one area that Anthem can score easy points on Destiny, it'll be the story. When Destiny first released, they were promising a huge sci-fi epic, and though it delivered on that to some extent, the writing was really lackluster, and it just showed in the way that everything was just called the this, the that. And I think having the writing team at BioWare on the case with Anthem gives it a chance that this would be a much more engaging world and something that people actually really want to dive into and learn more about the lore. So in the opening parts of the trailer, the narrator talks about the gods, these figures that came to the planet and started to mess with it in a colossal fashion, destroying things, remaking things, adding things. But then for some reason they have left, and they've left behind their tools and this force called the Anthem of Creation, and the people of Tarsus, or I suppose the human population, are left battling against the world that has been remade around them. And I think it's really interesting to have a kind of a very sci-fi setting where you've obviously got a very technologically advanced society where they have been confronted with something that's so beyond them that they call it a god. And I think that has a lot of space for doing interesting things with the story. So it's not just a kind of sci-fi story. It could have elements of the mystical into it and kind of talk about man's relation to technology where, you know, you kind of become dependent on it, but you have no idea how it works. And that old adage that any sufficiently advanced technology becomes magic. So I'd be very interested to see where they carry that, but it seems like a very strong footing to start the game's story off on, for sure.
The Anthem is all that remains.
There's a storm coming. These walls can't protect us forever.
Something is out there. It wants to destroy us all.
I just want to make a quick point here. So later on in the conference, they talked about all the different roles of the javelins. So the one on the ground is a ranger type, and the one that rescued it is an interceptor type. And unfortunately, I think it was the games director, was cut short when he was saying what the role of each of the different javelins were. But perhaps this section of the trailer could lead us to believe that it's some sort of support or healer, or perhaps something to do with saving your teammates or buffing them or reviving them, or maybe disrupting enemy attacks or something like that.
But we also wanted to do something that was, more of a dynamic and living world, a game that would change every time you came back and played it. And we also wanted to do something where, if you wanted to invite your friends into it, then you could do that as well. So that was really the initial vision of the game, not an MMO, not a multiplayer game with story sort of bolted on this side, but something new and different. And I think the team has really captured that vision over the years.
So I think it's interesting listening to these guys, because there's obviously a lot of spin and buzzwords and kind of feeling-laden phrases that they drop into these kind of presentations. But one thing you'll notice coming up the whole way through the presentation is they talk about how dynamic the world is, and that it's what they call our world, which is cheesy, but that everyone playing the game is going to have the same experience of the world, and that they'll be able to change it on the fly, drop in new events or new lore moments or this kind of thing. So it'd be very interesting, and even quite a brave decision to, if they're trying to keep the world permanent between everyone, to change it so that even people who join later or aren't about for a certain period miss things, like they did with the dynamic content in the recent Hitman game. I think that was very controversial as well, but that could be a way of making it a really gripping, engaging world that actually feels like it's got some element of exploration, as if it's not all constantly laid out before you, that you can actually explore it anytime you like, but actually when you're exploring at that specific time, you might find something that you're not going to find again for ages, or nobody else is going to be able to find if they join in next week. So I think that's a really risky decision for them to take, but they could be hinting at something like that. And I think they're definitely playing off the same thing that they've been evoking with Battlefield 5, and that's creating kind of a dynamic user journey day in, day out, and wanting people to come back and keep experiencing the game over a period of time. So I'll be really interested to see how far they actually go with that, and how much of it is just kind of marketing spin.
The world is really dangerous, and you're focused on your mission. And this is where other players get to play with you. The thing that's really interesting about this, it's unique for Anthem, is that this is a living shared world. So whether there's weather or it's nighttime, what we're experiencing together. Everyone that's playing Anthem at a moment is seeing the same thing.
Now, this is a really weird point for him to pick out on, because obviously, if you're playing with, say, up to you and 3 friends, or however many people you can get into a game, it would be totally unsurprising that obviously the 4 of you or 5 of you in that party are going to see the same thing. So is he talking that it's like an always online experience or something like that, so that even in your individual single player or party game sessions, every single game session, regardless of whether they're linked together, will be experiencing the same world? And what do they hope to achieve with that? What's the idea behind it? So, I mean, it'd be interesting if, for example, while you're playing single player, some huge catastrophe goes down that forces you back to base, and that you then have to link up with your friends to go and tackle that together. That could be an interesting thing that, I suppose, adds another layer to the shared experience that you can talk about even if you're not playing literally the same game together.
And this is what we mean when we talk about our world. It's a shared world that we all experience together. But then when I finish my mission, I come back to a base like Fort Tarsus. And this is a single player experience. I turn in my rewards, I talk to some characters, I experience the choices of my action.
Now, this is a really wise decision on their part, I think, because I don't think the shared hub world in Destiny really added that much to the game, apart from, just crowds of people standing around dancing. Whereas if you have the Fort Tarsus as a single player instance, it means that you can add characters, you can do big events, you can even change the way the fort looks to reflect what's going on in the story. So that is one way that I hope they're going to make the story that much more impactful and make it so that perhaps there are even branching narrative choices that completely change your fort so it looks totally different compared to somebody else's.
And this is where your story really lives and breathes.
And we're also designing it so that we can add story for years to come. So one of the first things that we hear when, from our community is they want to continue to play in our worlds. When they've finished Mass Effect or Dragon Age, players want more story. And so we've designed Anthem in a way that we can actually add more story for years to come. And it could be anything. A new moment with a character that you've grown to love, or an event in the world that deepens the lore, or an entirely new storyline and plot.
So I think obviously this points to the fact that they are trying to make it a continual service or product that has like a longer lifespan beyond just a single player story that you can enjoy some parts of in co-op, which I'm very pleased to hear. And one element she said there is adding something new to the world to tell you more about the lore. And I think it would be brilliant to tell the lore of this world. I mean, something that it sounds like it's fairly mythological in some respects because there are these godlike characters. Tell it in the style of Dark Souls, where, you know, rather than you sit and read through several books or you hear some long-winded exposition, people kind of just assume or they don't know what's actually going on. And so just by going out and exploring the world and actually stopping and looking at what's going on, you can find out more about the world, make your own inferences, or try to get a glimpse of a larger whole that can be revealed and molded by the evolution of the game over time.
Well, what's really exciting for us, and not just the writers, but all of the devs, the designers, the artists, is that we're creating something new and mysterious for players to discover. So at the heart of the premise of Anthem is a world left unfinished by the gods. But the gods left behind their massive tools, and those tools are in constant conflict with this unknowable force called the Anthem of Creation. And the chaos of those things pushing against each other means that the world is constantly being reshaped in new and unpredictable ways.
Yeah, violent storms, mutated creatures, gigantic monsters. It's a dangerous environment that you need to wear a suit of powered armor, a javelin, to be safe in.
So this sounds really interesting in terms of all the tools of the gods and the Anthem of Creation that are left around in the world there mean that it's a dynamic place. It's something that is constantly changing, like, you know, shifting tectonics or what have you, and also mutating and changing the enemies. So I think that gives them a huge playground to change the environment, change the enemy types, and reshape the game in a way that perfectly makes sense with the lore, and I suppose also to make you revisit areas that you've looked at previously. So imagine suddenly after playing for a month you go back to an opening area of the game and there's been some sort of act of tectonic shifting or some sort of technology's been awoken in the area that's opened up a new cave that leads to an entirely new playable area, or a enemy type that you were really familiar with and used to just rolling over actually suddenly now has a completely changed behavior because it's mutated, or even that certain areas of the map now require you to kit your javelin out differently so that you can actually survive there because of some sort of change in magnetics or atmosphere or what have you. I think that sounds like a really cleverly considered way of evolving the game over time.
Yeah, and one of the unique challenges for Anthem is that it's a world, an experience that's meant to feel alive, like it's happening right now. And so the world is always changing, whether the storms, seasons, and yeah, it's a really great concept to write for, because what it means is it gives us the opportunity to drop into the world, almost in real time, a dramatic event that changes the world for everyone. And that could be anything from gameplay to lore. So you are a freelancer, uniquely skilled to pilot these Javelin exosuits. And you need those suits to survive and fight in this world, because the world will kill you. But on top of that, our ancient rivals, the Dominion.
So she's talking about the Dominion here. So this seems like it's going to be another human faction, and I'm guessing this screenshot above is a picture of one of their settlements or something like that, or maybe an analog to the free city of Tarsus. And I think that's a really good idea of having a kind of rival power that has maybe like parity to you in terms of they've got their own javelins or something like that. That could be really cool for PvP, or just making a totally different enemy, whereas normally I suppose you're going to be either fighting huge monsters or swarms of critters, whereas actually going toe-to-toe with another javelin would be a different idea altogether.
They've discovered a way, they think, to weaponize the Anthem of creation, and so we need to stop them and protect the free people of Tarsus. We call them javelins, and there are 4, and they each have unique abilities. There's the Ranger, and then there's the Colossus, the Interceptor, and finally the Storm.
So what's interesting here is I think they sound like really cool classes and everything, but look at when they show each of the classes, they show them in a different environment. So the Ranger was in the sky, the Colossus was on a lava field, the Interceptor was in the jungle, and the Storm was underwater. Now, we already know that you're not going to be tied to any one particular suit, so could you imagine if certain areas of the game had certain unique gameplay opportunities, or required you to either be in one of the certain suits or with someone like that in your team to help you survive, because they keep emphasizing how deadly the environment is. And also that could be a really interesting way to introduce you and get you to level up and play with new suits.
Yeah, so each javelin gives you a different way to play the game. But the thing to remember is, like Kathleen said, you're not your suit. You are a freelancer, a pilot, which means you can decide which suit you want to use based on your mood, based on the mission you want to engage in, or the javelins that your friends are using. So really what this allows us to do is we've built the suits to look like they're built from the materials of the world. So they each have their own unique abilities. So let's take a look at the Ranger now. The Ranger is a more generalized suit, able to do a lot of different things, really designed for up-close and personal combat, one-on-one for the most part. The Colossus is heavier, more specialized, but able to really pack in big weapons that let them devastate the battlefield. Yeah, so we really want players to express themselves, both through customizing the way their javelin plays, through gear and weapons, but also being able to personalize the way that it looks.
I don't know whether this is a subtle nod to Neon Genesis Evangelion, this paint job, but I really hope it is. It's a fucking awesome paint job. I'll definitely be taking that one out for a spin.
Both through paint jobs as well as changing the actual geometry of the suit itself.
So another quick note here is you actually be able to swap out different armor pieces to give yourself an entirely different look on each of the chassis. So it sounds like weapons choices will affect your role and the way the game plays, and then the aesthetic choices that are down to color and the armor pieces that you take, but they probably won't affect the actual gameplay.
We want teams to be able to do this as well. And because you're going to be using a javelin for a long period of time, we really want you to be able to make it your own. Yeah, so we are going to have some cosmetics and vanity items that you'll be able to purchase, but you're always going to know what you're going to buy before you spend any money on it. So no loot boxes, no ability to pay for power.
I'm so glad Star Wars Battlefront 2 took the bullet for us on this one, in terms of just slapping EA's hand and saying you can't do toxic monetization policy. So that all sounds fairly benign. I'm not worried about it at all. Side note, WTF is this thing on the screen?
So that means no ability to spend money on gameplay advantage at all within Anthem. But even more important than that, we want to make sure that Anthem is an immersive experience that feels like it's complete from the get-go. So that means a main story, a big open world, and an ongoing service that provides new content for a long period of time. New story, new experiences for everyone.
Freelancer, time to get to work.
So this big stompy boy here is the equivalent, I guess, of a aircraft carrier or like some sort of mobile launch platform, which is like on an armored interior and a launch platform on the top for the javelins. I just think that's a fantastic bit of kit. I really like the aesthetic direction they've taken with this and just fully embracing the idea of kind of mechanization of everything to the full.
Faye said these bastards made some kind of acid. They're using it as a weapon. So, find where they're making this garbage and shut it all down.
So first thing to note here, guys, you are actually limited in the amount of jetpack you can use. You see that kind of vaguely crescent-shaped bar that fills up from the center outwards in the middle. That's actually the heat on your jetpack, and you'll notice here that as it gets towards the red, I'm guessing that means you're just going to drop out the sky or have to descend. But as he actually flies through a waterfall, it cools him off and resets that. So I think that's a really cool gameplay choice, allowing you to look at the environment and plan your movement through it to get better advantages. So that's a nice element of skill.
Owen, what's the plan here?
Picking up loads of scars nearby. Take a look around the area, but be careful.
Now, I thought this was a really weird decision, having these enormous numbers. You can see here where I've paused it. The numbers are so big, they actually obscure what you're shooting at and the whole center of your screen. And I just think that's really immersion breaking. It's tacky, and I hope that doesn't make it into the final build.
Right.
Here also worth noting, I don't know whether this is something that is scripted or whether it's dynamic, but there is limited terrain destruction in this part, and that'd be something nice that I'd like to see carried on in other elements of the game, because it somewhat takes away from the fantasy of being in a sort of invulnerable power suit of armor if you're not laying waste to everything around you, and particularly as there's going to be like thick vegetation and caves and stuff, it'd be really nice to set the jungle on fire and knock stalactites down and that kind of stuff.
Checking out the Scar Camp some more.
Look at all the weapons! Oh, and the turrets! Better move quickly.
Worth noting here as well that the boost bar or overheating bar for flying whilst underwater is replaced by what looks like an oxygen bar. I can't tell, but I think it slowly decreased in the last bit of the footage. So hopefully there's something where you can surface into little air pockets or collect bubbles or something, a bit like Sonic.
There's a Shaper relic. Wait, something's odd. Get a closer look, would you? See those radiant pieces of energy? They're echoes from the Anthem of Creation. Loads of scars nearby. Be careful.
So although the ability to freeze enemies and then blow them up is awesome, here's another piece of UI I thought that was just so obnoxious. I mean, it looks like it's trying to be a fighting game, or I just don't want these huge combo like shaking around plastered all over my screen. Like, if you want to show me that I'm doing something right or benefiting from a behavior, that should be displayed by graphics in the game rather than like a big clumsy piece of UI.
Return them to the relic. You've got to silence it fast. It's gone silent. Disaster averted. Do you think we get a bonus for... Wait, something's happening.
What the hell was that?
I think that was whatever laid all the eggs around here. The sound came from below your position. On the plus side, this definitely counts toward hazard pay. There's a trail of this acid gunk leading down. Follow it, and we should find the source.
Interesting to note here that the storm suit doesn't seem to have a boost bar when hovering around in this mode, so that might be I'm guessing it's going to be some sort of like support caster style one, and probably less so on heavy on the sort of weapons, but more perhaps dealing effects or controlling the enemy or having some sort of enhanced capability. And it would kind of make sense that it can kind of hover above the battlefield and look at the best place to deploy those various things. So perhaps this is an indication that it's going to go down that route. So, as kind of a final takeaway, my enthusiasm for Anthem has not dipped at all after watching that. I did find it to be kind of overly flashy and not necessarily super satisfying in terms of getting into the nitty-gritty of the gameplay. However, I do realise that, you know, E3 is for kind of the mass consumer and they don't want to get bogged down in that. They want to sell kind of the flashy overall vision and the dream of the game. But if we look at the way they've set the lore up, already looks more interesting than Destiny, and a good foundation for evolving the ongoing experience around. Also look at just the core gameplay mechanics. So we've got 4 suits that you can switch between at your leisure, which I think is a great idea. You've got a kind of isolated or sectioned off single player campaign or story area of the game, which means that can be more impactful and change based on your choices. And the core mechanics of the combat, you've got so many more things or interactions happening that have a potential to make it interesting. So not only are we dealing with our usual assortment of different weapons, we also have melee attacks, we also have the different nature of each suit, so that they're going to have presumably different speeds, different flight times, different health bonuses, different physical interactions with melee attacks or the ability to dodge out the way, things like that. Then we have interactions between different classes or the different suit types and the abilities that are inherent with those, and that I presume will also change based on what weapon you've got loaded out at the time. And then you also have a very different style of movement, allowing you to fly, get a huge view over the field and aim your guns or impact weapons differently, but also presumably at a trade-off of making yourself a bigger target. But then you can relocate faster, go to cover, drop into water, get into higher places. Like, it's just so much more involved than the usual kind of one flat plane of motion that we get to play with in other shooters, particularly Destiny, where you've got one flat plane of motion and then you can jump. Whereas with this, you get almost a full freedom of movement in the air, and that's got its own system tied to the heat of it that you've got to kind of ration that out to relocate around the battlefield. Now, one thing that I just think what they need to be the glue that holds all of these systems together is really good enemy design. And that means that enemies aren't just this chittering mass for you to sort of unload all of your weapons on and watch them blow up and see big combo letters appear, or some huge sort of hulking thing that you're burning down over hours. They need to be really dynamic. They need to force you to move, force you to use all your different abilities, force you to use the environment. They need to have kind of changing or more complicated behaviors where perhaps one type of enemy forces you to stay on the ground, another type of enemy encourages you to use this kind of weapon, or has different effects on you, or favors being engaged with a different type of javelin or something like that, so that there's really complicated and dynamic team play that will just keep the game fresh over a long period of time, and also give the design team lots of different levers and adjustments to make so that they can really tweak how these enemies work at a granular level, and easily make the game fresh by making them behave differently and having a wide variety of behaviours for them to play around with. And also, to go along with the enemies, we need interesting quest designs, interesting objectives that the enemies are going to contend with us. So whether that's simple things like holding ground or delivering a objective to a place. We could also do something with VIPs or defense missions, or even imagine, for example, we have to collect something and take it back to our Strider carrier creature. Well, imagine if grabbing that thing was a tactical decision that meant you could only use half your guns or half your abilities, or one of your teammates can't fly, or it attracts the attention of a larger enemy that can't even be killed but just has to be disabled and kept away from them, or even that it started disrupting the environment and changing the terrain play. I think that having really rich encounters and systems like this would be really important to the long-term health of the game, and making sure the moment-to-moment play is really engaging again and again and again, because that is one thing that I think Destiny has suffered with, is that the end game has just sort of, people have just left it and then come back when they've added more stuff in, because it hasn't been fulfilling over a longer period of time. So getting these initial systems right and really investing in them now will save them a lot of effort in the long run, and add a lot of life onto the game in the long run as well, I think, and also put them head and shoulders above Destiny, above all the other competition, really. So that's my hope. We didn't really see that much of how the enemies interacted or what they looked like, and didn't have a chance to see a longer drawn out fight and the kind of tactics that are employed in it. So that is something I'd like to hear from people who actually were on the floor playing it, for sure. So guys, that's pretty much everything I wanted to say based on the Anthem presentation. If you stuck around to the end, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you've got any thoughts on my kind of speculation or the things I was pointing out, let me know down below in the comments. I've probably missed some stuff, so let me know about that as well. And let me know about your biggest hopes and concerns for the game, because that's something I'd definitely like to make a follow-up video on, is what are the risks and potential opportunities that need to be cashed in on while they are developing Anthem. I know it's kind of going to be right towards the end of its development cycle now, but it doesn't mean that good changes can't still be made, and that EA might see what we, the community, are saying. Anyway, that's everything from me, guys. A like would be much appreciated. If you like what I'm doing here, subscribe. There'll be more to follow on all the EA content, Anthem in the future, and various other games. If you've got some constructive criticism, feel free to leave a downvote, or let me know in the comments below. I've been the Discerning Gamer. Until next time.